I come in and introduce myself and say, hey, we're going to talk about lockout tagout today or fall protection, people are kind of like, huh, I've already lost a lot of my crowd. I didn't get them into it. I've worked in facilities and been in facilities where a leader walks by, everybody goes the opposite direction or tries to avoid them.
Hey everyone, this is Evan from One Track, and you were listening to another episode of Warehouse Visionaries, where I sit down with leadership in the future of warehousing to talk about how they're doing it so the rest of us can too. Today, I'm talking to Antwan Davis. He's the founder of Davis Safety and Training Consultancy, and we're going to dive deep into how to actually create a safety culture that starts with people, not policies. Let's dive in. Antwan, I appreciate you hopping on and joining me today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, do you mind giving yourself a little introduction? Tell everyone in the audience who you are, what you've been up to, and what you have cooking now with the new company.
Okay. My name is Antwan Davis, born and raised in Youngstown, Ohio. I moved to Columbus, Ohio in 2021, right after COVID, and to explore some bigger opportunities in safety, and to go back to school. So in that process, got a human resource certificate in human resource management and also a degree in sociology, one semester away from a bachelor's degree in human resource management as well. At the same time, I learned quite a bit with safety that I couldn't receive in a classroom since I've been in Columbus, and it led me to create my own safety and training consultation company, Davis Safety and Training Consultation.
No, very cool. I think one thing that, and I was reading up on you and you sent your bio ahead of time, but one thing I think you left out there is you started in the military, which I think is obviously I think it's an impressive thing and has a lot of translations to operations and leadership in general. So I'm curious, how do you think your military experience has shaped how you approach leadership, teamwork, and safety, just in general, how you approach the workplace?
In the military, fortunately, I had my older brother working with me. So many people, when I tell them, they're like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." He was extremely hard on me, but he taught me a whole lot about leadership. One of the biggest things was flexibility. In the military, you're always flexible. You have to adapt to whatever situation comes to you, and the only thing you have a lot of times is the team that is there with. So the group of people that you have with you is oftentimes the best resource that you have. And if you can't trust the resources that you have, then you can't be successful.
How do you apply that? Because I think everyone always talks about the labor crisis and it's hard to find good people. And I think there's a big change in just kind of culturally how new people are entering the workforce and how they respond to different styles. So if you kind of put yourself in the shoes of a supervisor, ops manager, general manager in a warehouse, would you kind of approach this melting pot of different personalities and styles and just to rally everyone around like a safety culture in a building?
And the most important thing is to actually listen to people. One of the things that I learned as a safety person is I can know a whole lot, but I don't know everything. And there is something that every person can contribute, and learning to take other people's ideas into account make them feel extremely important and help them to buy in. So even if it's just asking people what they believe is important in safety, and then, at least bringing up, even if you can't, we can't apply everything that every person wants. I'd like bumpers on the side of the highway so people can't crash, but we can't do everything. However, if we at least listen to people's ideas and acknowledge them, it makes people feel important.
Yeah, and I think that helps create that sense of buy-in, right? Like to your point, you can't do everything. There's only so much budget, only so much resource to put stuff into place. And quite frankly, not every idea is a good idea, but at least if people feel heard, they're a little more apt to like follow the processes because they feel like they had a hand in building it as opposed to being like dictated to. I think a lot of times employees can feel that way when leadership comes down with a new policy. Whereas if you kind of create that two-way street, it just is a better environment for everyone, kind of from the bottom up and top down.
Agreed.
So I think that's one challenge, but I think there's a lot of other challenges. So what are some of those main challenges or barriers that you specifically face or maybe clients of yours face when they're trying to create safety programs in a warehouse environment?
A lot of times, the hardest part is creating something that people have to adapt to. Change is often the biggest thing for people to have. And then usually the biggest way to ease people into change is communication. If I tell you, hey, Evan, this is what we're going to do, and it happens, you may resist naturally, but you're more inclined to push through it if I explained it to you and talked to you and said, "Hey, this is something that we have coming on." A lot of companies are reactive, and so usually safety is seen as a punishment. So, hey, we implemented this new policy. Well, I know we only did it because Antwan got hurt last week. And now Antwan's the reason why we're having this concern instead of wording it in a way, hey, we did have an incident last week. Here's a way for us to prevent this from happening to somebody else. And I think that's a big part is, teaching people how to understand that things are going to happen. Change is inevitable. COVID was a huge challenge that everybody had to deal with, and I don't know anybody who is really, really excited about that change. But as we learn more and, we got information, whether it been from the state or the company that you particularly work for, things made it a whole lot easier once communication came into play.
Why do you think that is the case, that whole reactive mindset around safety in particular, for sure? I think the reactive nature of something happens, I have to then go fix that problem. I think now people are starting to think about, well, how can I be proactive around safety? And I don't know, what is your take on why that's been the case and how people can move from that reacting to incidents versus actually like getting ahead of things through better training, better policies, better communication?
I think it's a big shift in mindset. I think for a lot of times people seeing safety as a hindrance, saw safety as a barrier to productivity. And I feel the opposite. I feel if you have people that appear to work safely, they know that they're safe, they feel safe, they believe that they're safe. I believe they become more productive. And I believe now people are realizing that OSHA isn't slowing down with citations. Just in 2024, I looked at the website this morning, there were over 2,050 citations of at least $40,000. Those are just 40,000 and above. That costs companies $185 million. And that's just in 2024. So when companies see like, hey, this is a ton of money, that piece of PPE that is $40,000 doesn't seem so bad over a citation that could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollar range. So I think now companies are looking at it like insurance. If I have something in place, it'll protect me in the long run as opposed to trying to fix something when it comes up.
And I tell you what, 185 million is a whole lot of zeros. I wouldn't want to be getting the checkbook out and writing that one. And I think that's an interesting point you brought up because I find that, especially in the logistics world, everyone says safety's number one. That's our top priority. Safety, safety, safety. But then in practice, you find that they don't want to actually invest or take the steps to actually making it a safer environment. I think a lot of companies pay lip service to that. Some companies are doing this extremely well. A lot of our customers doing this extremely well. But I think in general, that's what you find is companies struggle to kind of put their money, their time, and their resources where their mouth is when it comes to those core values. So how would you go about convincing senior leadership to actually prioritize and invest in safety as a core value? I think part of it is that, oh, $185 million, it's a big number. Opens a lot of eyes, but how else would you go about trying to convince the people at the top to really invest in safety?
And one of the things that I like to do is kind of get to know the people that I'm working with. Everybody does say safety is number one. Safety is the top focus. However, you have to get people to know what is safety. When I ask people what is safety, I get a lot of different answers on what safety is. And essentially, it's different at every level. And sometimes you have to get executives to look at it as a dollar sign. My return on investment is this way. How safety improves my return on investment, and then get them to understand how people at the other level are going to see that as well. Your finance team is definitely going to see the benefit in reduced number of payouts to workers' compensation or increased claims. That number will go down. Your management team, get to see that and be like, hey, we have a little bit of something to work with. Our leadership buys into what we care about. And then the floor associates get to see, hey, they care about us. They got us this new thing to be able to show us that this is what they care about. Most people just want to get home. They want to be able to know that they work in an environment that allows for them to get back home to their families. And as that works for the person at the bottom, that in turn affects everybody above.
And I find, and you brought this up earlier, it's like safety is this kind of domino effect. If people are safer, they're typically happier at work, they feel more secure. If they feel more secure, they're naturally gonna be more productive, they're gonna pay more attention to the processes, and it just kinda has all these positive effects. There's not gonna be constant turnover and trying to hire and train people, and it just kinda rising tide lifts all ships, and I feel like safety is that. It just can sometimes be seen as, like you called it, like a roadblock to operations or a roadblock to productivity, when it's really the driving factor between great operations is solid safety practices.
I agree. I honestly believe that how you see things from what I call it the top to bottom approach and bottom to top approach is very important. So if I talk to a CEO, a president, an executive of a company, and they don't really support safety or believe that safety is beneficial, I believe everybody in the company underneath them is going to feel the same way because that's what they're going to see. However, if I see the person at the very bottom of that company, whether it's the janitor or, the person working at the desk or anything like that. If they're really into safety, in my opinion, that means that everybody above them has taught them to be that way. It could be just a person, but the view from the outside perspective is that company is 1,000 times more safe because the people at the bottom are even taught safety at a high level.
And I think that's what a safety culture really is. Like, everyone throws around safety culture, but I think that's what that looks like. Not just at the top, safety is our number one priority, but, like, at the very bottom, like, safety is the number one priority from top to bottom, from bottom to top, and that's really what that looks like in practice, which I think is hugely important. I think we were talking before the episode, and you brought up that people should be the driving force of safety, not policies, which I think is really interesting because a lot of people think about EHS and they just set policies and, call it a day. But why do you kind of take that approach of people as the driving force? It's not the policies you create, it's the people you train. And then how do you think companies can better think about that like dynamic between people, processes slash policies and like systems and technology?
I'm an accountant and engineer. We were in a meeting and they told me people process tools. And it was a correction from me because I thought process should come first, then people, then tools. I thought if you create a process, you could fit any person into that process. And that's what most companies think, especially in the logistics world. I have the process there. Anybody can follow this process and get the same results. However, that's not necessarily true. If I have the right people in place, it doesn't matter what policies I have in place, we can still be successful. One of the first companies I worked with when I came to Columbus had 8 different primary languages. Well, it didn't matter what I knew because I could communicate in all 8 primary languages. And the primary language that I knew the second most was Arabic, which had the second least amount of people that spoke it. So I was getting nowhere with the traditional way of training. So what I had to learn was the people around me had all the concern. So when I got out there and I walked around, I talked with the people, I addressed small concerns. Hey, what about this or what about that? Not only did I make small changes, but I also let people know I appreciated the fact that they noticed something that I couldn't notice. I'm 6'4". So most things for me as far as reaching up is not a problem. However, the average height in the facility I worked in was about 5'4". So that means a lot of things that I could access at a high level, they couldn't. And then that helped us to realize that maybe some of these things we can change, we need to make them more convenient to the team. The program itself isn't effective. As we see from those 2,050 citations, I guarantee you at least 2,000 of those companies have OSHA programs, that programs and safety policies and procedures that are there. However, the people likely didn't follow through or somebody was given a shortcut that they were able to have. So when you encourage people, and that number affects anybody, you tell me 150 million, I'm like, or 185 million, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money. If people don't believe it, look at the Powerball. People play it all the time to look at that number. Another thing is getting people to understand that safety isn't something you have to do. If safety is truly a part of your culture, safety is just who you are. You do things safely just because it's not something additional. And a lot of times people don't know how to get away from what I call book safety. I tell people, hey, if I start telling you about OSHA standards, such and such and such and such, you're going to start getting bored. But if I tell you something that I know relates to you right now, the Super Bowl's coming. Millions and millions of people around the world know about the Super Bowl, even if you don't care about football. So if I reference it to something that you actually enjoy or something that you like, it definitely draws attention a whole lot more. Me being a Dallas Cowboy fan is the butt of a lot of jokes, and I use it to my advantage, especially when meetings come up during football season. It's very easy to talk about how good or bad we played from a safety perspective, and people love it. Just, something different than policy this, slip, trips, and falls this, lockout, tag out this. I reference that same thing into something else. And a lot of times it's 100 times more effective.
Well, as a Carolina Panthers fan, I can tell you that the Cowboys don't have it the worst. I can firmly say that. Panthers started turning around at the end, so don't get me wrong. I'm excited about next season, but man, it's been a rough couple of years. So I feel your pain. So I think that's a really interesting point, though, about engaging employees a little bit differently, right? I hear a lot that training is tough, especially when you're talking about not just training a person, but training a whole site, training multiple sites at the same time. What have you found? So obviously, I think bringing in stories, making it a little more relatable, that's great. But are there other best practices for how do you actually keep people engaged in safety training when you're not just in a room face to face, eyeballs with one person, you're talking to 20, 50, 500 people across different locations? What are some of your tips and tricks to keep people engaged and focused on these like safety training programs and rollouts?
First is capturing their attention in the very beginning. If I come in and introduce myself and say, hey, we're going to talk about lockout, tag out today or fall protection, people are kind of like, huh, I've already lost a lot of my crowd. I didn't get them into it. Typically, do an icebreaker to start off. Get people to, ask a question, get some responsiveness, make people know that you want them to be into the training. And then not just reading off a training or talking about a training, but actually have something for them to do. Keep them engaged in the process at some point in time. Blend in some of the words with actions. Hey, how many people have experienced this? I asked a simple question before any training. How many people love safety? Everybody raises their hand. How many people practice great safety? Most people raise their hand. Then I asked a question. I said, everybody knows about a safe practice on the highway called a speed limit. How many people are left-hand driver, which, is in a lane where you typically go above the speed limit? How many people are middle lane drivers? And how many people are right lane drivers? All of those people can be considered safe people. However, it is viewed that the person on the left is a little more risky than the person that's on the right. They're extremely conservative, and the person in the middle is there. I use something like traffic because everybody knows traffic. We don't have to know anything else to know safety, but I know a slow driver and I know a fast driver. So something like that to get people involved oftentimes make things a whole lot easier to get people involved because now it's not 15%, 20%, 30% of the people that understand fully what I'm talking about. Everybody knows about driving. And unless you live at work, somehow you have to get there. So that that this is something you're going to encounter on an everyday basis. So it's getting people to relate to a topic to something else. That's often the best way is not only engaging them and just mixing it all in, getting some engagement, letting hey, I'm a person. Most people always look at me and they're like, "Oh, you're a safety man." And I'm like, "Who? There's a safety guy coming? If there's a safety guy coming, let me know when you see him so I can avoid him." Because a lot of people do have a misconception that safety people only want to find things wrong. And I live by the mindset that I can't change the past. So if the past happened, it happened. But if I can help us to not do this again, it's extremely beneficial for us in the long term. And that's kind of what I like to convey, not only to executives or workers, but also other safety professionals that ask, hey, how do you get people to buy into a safety program when you're a new guy? Or what do you do if you got a policy change and you need to force people to do something they haven't been doing? Work with them. Understand that there's going to be a grace period, but just because we make something effective January 15th, that doesn't mean on January 16th, everybody's going to know 100% how to do everything effectively and be proficient. It's working people through that process together and getting people to understand that as a safety person, I'm still a person. I'm a human being too. I get up in the morning. I have kids. I got to get them ready for school. I have to drive to work as well. I care just as much about you going home to your family as you do. And that's, a lot of times when you integrate some of those things into training, like you said, the story, I broke my leg in 2019 in a basketball game. Immediately, my daughter told me she didn't want me to play basketball anymore because it's not safe. As a 4-year-old telling me that I wasn't safe playing basketball, that hurt quite a bit because it was something that I love. But then I had to realize that somebody else saw safety as something different than I did. And I had to realize maybe daddy isn't as young as she used to be, and he can't do some of those same things that he used to. And I had to learn, myself. And I tell people all the time, I have a 9-year-old supervisor that needs me to get home at night, and I need to be able to do that. And that's my reason for being safe.
You know, it's all about making it personal for people. What is their reason for being safe? What's their reason for going home? And like for you, your daughter, I mean, it's a pretty powerful reason to want to get home safe. You know, you realize you're not 10 foot tall and bulletproof like you used to be when you were 18 years old. Um, and I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with. 'Cause to your point, I think a lot of people see safety leader more like auditors, where you're coming in with a suit and tie and throwing the OSHA book in front of people and referencing all the different standards. When instead it's more of like an NFL coach, back to the whole NFL analogy, like, you're trying to get the best out of your players. You're not the one actually playing the sport, but your job is to help them be successful and help them not get injured and come off the field and make the plays and do all the things right, and that's what the job is at the end of the day. It's not finding things wrong, it's how can I help you be better and help you get home to be with your family and to, do all the things because no one loves to be at work all the time. They have lives outside of work they wanna get home to. Let's back things up to you're walking into a facility, to a company partners with you for the first time. How would you go about building this safety program, auditing what's going wrong, figuring out what the opportunities are? What is your process to kinda coming in and building this successful safety program with a new company, a new client?
One of the first things we do is walk. And as we walk through a facility, a warehouse, wherever, it could be a parking lot, I start to ask the people to identify things. Typically, I don't say anything during the time we're walking. I just kind of observe and I speak to people. And most people usually see, you come in, like I said, I'm not a small guy, 6'4", dress shirt, dress pants. Most people assume I'm somebody, important as I walk through. And a lot of times it's just speaking to the people and understanding what things are. A lot of times you'll have people to call this respond and say, hey, who are you? Or what are you doing here? And I usually just say, hey, I am interviewing for such and such position. I usually make it a lower level position and it's just somebody that's a part of the group. And I say, I'm really nervous, and they're walking me around, but, I'll talk to you later. A lot of times it's just, building a rapport with a company and getting that person who's with me, whether it be an executive or somebody else, to do the same thing. It's usually a manager, a safety professional, and they're like, hey, they want to know what I see. And I usually never point anything out during the time, but I make mental notes. Then when I get to the end, I'll ask them what it is that they see. A lot of times, people are looking for you to point out people's mistakes, but that's exactly what we don't want to do for our people, is to say, hey, here's a mistake, here's a mistake, here's a mistake, here's a mistake. But it's actually the things that I seen positive. I look at it a lot different. And I say, hey, these are the things that I saw. I really like that your people were so approachable that they can come up to you. I've worked in facilities and been in facilities where a leader walks by, everybody goes the opposite direction or tries to avoid them. The barrier I like to eliminate is that safety people aren't operations people, or that safety people aren't floor managers, or they're not workers too. We all workers, we just have a different goal. So a lot of times it's just getting the company, and companies fall for it every time. They'll give me all the things that they seen. Well, it could have been clean in this area, and we had cords on the ground. And I'm like, no, I seen a group of people that were cleaning up over here in this particular area after they were finished with this. And I seen people group lifting in this area, and this was a focus here. And a lot of times when companies ask me, well, what did you see that was wrong? And I said, I didn't see anything wrong. People kind of get shocked and they're like, do you really know what you're doing? And then I present that as my thing. I said, if I come in here and I tell you everything that you do wrong, I give you a report that says that, you've done everything wrong. Isn't that the same thing we don't want OSHA to do? So it's getting people to understand that there is a human approach to it. And, just congratulating people. Thank you. I appreciate you, cleaning that up over there. I'm happy that I can join a company where people work together. And then the people who don't know until usually later, like, hey, this guy's a safety guy, not an actual floor guy like me, a maintenance guy. Those things happen. And that's where a lot of times people are like, that works. And I'm like, yeah. I was like, think about it. If you yell at your child every day, they become numb to it because they know, like, hey, I'm going to get yelled at for making a mistake. But when you show them kindness, they kind of look and they're like, okay, well, I know I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I will try not to do it again. And we want to do that as well. As adults, everybody likes to hear thank you. Doesn't matter who you are, how old you are. We all want to feel appreciated. And a lot of people spend more hours at work than they do with their families engaged on a daily basis. So to hear I'm appreciated at work, or that somebody actually is happy that I'm doing something at work, a lot of times it's a person that changes your day, not necessarily, hey, I got to go to work in the morning. Hey, I got to be in there for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. Yeah, that may not be the best thing. Today I might be tired. I might have had a sleeping baby at home. I might have a sick kid at home that I have to take care of. But once you make it a people approach and you focus on the people and strengthening that relationship with the people, the safety part becomes extremely easy. It doesn't matter the industry. If you look at it, the incident rates are going up across the board, and it just takes, good companies. When you have the companies with the lower TRIR, it's typically people who care about their workers. The workers feel cared about. They have a real culture. For some people, culture is a word. Yeah, we have a great safety culture. Then I say, well, what is the culture? How is the culture? If I go ask 10 employees, are those 10 employees going to be like, yeah, we have a wonderful culture and here's what it is? They should give you 10 different answers or similar answers that all lead to the same thing. Like, hey, we feel trusted here to be able to be safe. And I think that's a big part of it is once you involve the people and get people to know, like, hey, safety isn't just when you make a mistake. Hey, we acknowledge the small things that you do, on a regular basis to prevent things from happening. That is what creates the proactive part of a safety culture.
Yeah, and I think, like, there is a place for corrective action. I don't think that's what you're saying at all. Like, there is a place to hold people accountable and, have tough coaching conversations, but I think what you're getting at is if you just set policies and then fire someone as soon as they make a mistake, you're never gonna get better at safety because you're always gonna hire someone new, and it's just gonna be a burn and churn of people. Where if you take this approach of people first and really figure out what is going wrong, how can you make their lives better, and then to your point, congratulate them for the things they're doing right, even if it's little things, because it feels really good to, get a nice job when you're at work, even if that's all it is, the high five and like you're doing a great job. But that's what creates that buy-in. And then everything else falls into place, right? The policies start being followed and you can work on that piece later. But I feel like in most companies, their policies are pretty good. There's obviously room for improvement and everything, but on paper, the policies are pretty good. It's the people aspect that's missing and getting people to buy into those policies. And that's again, that's what takes a, a decent safety culture to a great safety culture. And that's the missing link is the people side.
I just have another a thing that came to my mind. One of the things that I feel like as leaders we struggle with is we believe that since we know things, that everybody knows the same thing. And a lot of times, problems that happen with our people are our fault, and we need to take more accountability. And one of the things I learned very quickly is I have to prepare you for what I expect from you. I may know that this standard is here and this is coming and this change is going to be made. I'm ready for it. Are you ready? You probably don't know that this change is necessary, that it's needed, it's coming, or that, we should put a policy together. So I should inform you. So one of the things I always tell people that their accountability is usually the fourth step. First thing I have to do is teach you what I want you to know. The second thing is I have to train you to do it the appropriate way. And the third part is I need to be able to acknowledge that you understand everything that I've given you. And a lot of times the protection that policies and procedures give us is, hey, if we correctly train people, if we correctly teach them what we need to teach them, then have them sign this manual to say, yes, I have been given this training blah, 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 and we hold them accountable. But a lot of times what people are doing is they're looking at the cost of training and they're like, hey, I really don't want to train this person for 40 hours. If I can get that number down to 20 hours, that's 20 hours of productivity that I can increase. However, that can create a problem for us if we don't do things appropriately. So when we make that a that on our end, as far as training is concerned, then we also fail the people that we're working with.
Yes, the shortcuts are gonna mess things up eventually. It might give you a small hit to productivity now, but then you become one of those zeros in the $185 million payouts of workers' comp claims down the road, and that's arguably way more important than increasing your UPH by a tenth of a percent this week.
I agree.
All right, my question to you is what does safety look like to you personally when you think about the warehouse of the future?
I think in a warehouse of the future, I think from an outside perspective, it would be the ability to go into a warehouse and feel like every person is your point of contact. I can go anywhere. Now, I'm not going to ask a person, hey, what are the procedures? Everybody the same questions. But when I go up to a person, a random person, as that could happen in an OSHA interview. If I go up to any person and ask them, hey, how is your warehouse? I believe that if everybody has a culture, a sustainable, positive culture, I believe that is the great warehouse. And I believe that when you have a great safety program, it doesn't hurt quality or productivity. It only increases those. So I believe the best warehouses of the future will optimize, bringing out the best in every person, and utilizing people, as you said, from a head coach perspective, utilizing the skills of people to be able to help others.
No, I love that. I always love when people their answers to this don't start with, again, robotics and technology. Like, it starts with people, and I think no matter what the future holds with technology, people aren't going away, and you have to really invest in people and culture, and then processes get stacked on top of that, and then technology on top of that to then enable this strategy, but it all has gotta start with a solid people and just culture in the building, and to me, that's what the warehouse of the future looks like is that kind of triangle mindset of like people, then processes, then technology at the very top.
I agree 1,000%.
All right, we're about out of time here. So last couple of questions for you. You've talked about, keeping up with education through all kinds of different pieces. So what resources, podcasts, groups, conferences would you recommend that people go check out if they want to, upgrade their knowledge about safety, about leadership, about, operations in general?
I don't want to be a salesperson, but LinkedIn Learning was a very big tool for me as far as to learn a lot of things. A lot of places have library cards that give you free access to LinkedIn Learning. And I think from a development standpoint, when people have the ability to learn on their own and you give people an option instead of forcing people to, it allows people to develop a little bit better. As every one of us doesn't have the same skill, I'd love to say, hey, everybody should go and become a certified safety professional. That's not the route that everybody's going to take, and it's not the most important route. But I would tell people to identify what it is that they enjoy. A lot of times for me, it's training and development workshops that teach me different ways to train people or different effective techniques for training that make it better for me as opposed to safety. And most people are like, aren't you a safety person? I'm like, yeah, but I want to make safety exciting. So, I have to do something a little bit out of my typical realm to bring those things out. Also, I would tell people to go look at anything that gets them to physically touch them. I know a lot of people like audiobooks and things like that. I love to be able to listen to audiobooks while I'm driving. Makes it a whole lot easier to pass time, while on the road. But if people find something that they enjoy, I think that developing the people individually also in turn develops people around. So a lot of times I'll look at things, and I have an organization I work with where a lot of the guys like WWE wrestling. So every time I'm at the facility, we talk wrestling. We talk, Roman Reigns and John Cena, and that's their way of showing me like, hey, this person got hurt. Did you see this? And what happened? And that works for them. And it's not trying to force everybody to be like, oh, go read, the OSHA book. Probably isn't gonna happen. Don't do that. But tailoring it towards something that people enjoy, and that makes learning a lot more fun.
No, I love it. All right. Well, like I said, we're about out of time here. I really appreciate you coming on today, Antoine. It's been great. I think I've learned a ton. I know people who are going to listen to this going to learn a ton too. So now's the time for the pitch. Where can people find you, learn more about you and the work you're doing, and just get in touch if they want to work with you?
Okay. So my website is davis-safety.com. So it's DAVIS hyphen SAFETY.com. And you can learn about a lot of things. A lot of people ask me, like, what services do you have? And I have a list of services online, but those change on a daily basis. The company has different needs, whether it's CPR first aid training, whether it's leadership training, whether it's, developmental training or just simple safety program. I have it all, and my team and the people that are working with me are very excited to develop new things as new needs come available as well.
Perfect. Well, wishing you and the team tons of success. Again, appreciate you coming on today's episode, and we'll talk later.
Thank you as well.
Here are my top 3 takeaways from today's discussion. Number 1, create a positive safety culture. You have to approach safety as a proactive effort rather than a reaction to problems. When implementing policies, frame them as ways to prevent issues, not as punishments. You need to be a coach, not an auditor. Take time to acknowledge and celebrate the good work employees do to stay safe and show them their efforts are actually valued. That's how you create buy-in. Number 2, always put people first. Start by building strong relationships with employees. During walkthroughs, focus on what's being done right before pointing out areas for improvement. Make safety relatable by connecting it to real life examples like sports or daily driving. And when employees feel valued and respected, they're way more likely to embrace a culture of safety. And number 3, get buy in from leadership to invest in training. Help leaders understand the benefits of prioritizing safety: fewer injuries, lower workers' comp claims, and improved productivity. Make training engaging and easy to understand, teaching employees not just what to do, but why it matters. Then ensure they feel supported and accountable in following through. A great safety program brings out the best in everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Warehouse Visionaries. I learned a lot from Antoine, and the rest of you will too. Remember to check us out at onetrack.ai/warehouse-visionaries or follow us on YouTube at onetrack-ai to never miss an episode. And of course, don't forget to give Antoine a follow as well.